Patrick Stewart. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force who will be retiring at the end of this year. I am originally born in a small town called Bastrop, Louisiana, and then later on I moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I was raised by my mom and my great aunt who has since gone to glory, and it was just us and my brother. So I had a great childhood, no complaints. Always surrounded by family and friends, so it was great.
Good. So tell me about your family. What your family life per se?
Well, I'm married to my love of my life, Tara Williams Stewart from Gibbsland, Louisiana, and we have a wonderful life together. We have one son, Patrick Dwayne Stewart II, so that makes life a whole lot better. At 4 years old, we had him a little later on in life, so I'm actually 44. We had him at 40, and so it's kind of odd raising a 4-year-old at this later junction in life, moving into retirement, and somebody actually moving into school for the first time. So, but it's fun though. I have a great time between that and family and church. I just have a great time. I try to enjoy and make the most out of life.
That's nice. So, is there any interests you have, or like any hobbies per se?
Have a lot of hobbies. I like to do a lot of different things. I'm real engaged in social media. I have a podcast. I do little blogs from here and there. But I'm also, again, I give the majority of my time to work, which I love. Phase 2 medical training director for the Air Force, so I get a chance to travel. I have 14 different medical facilities. It may seem like it's not a hobby, but for me, it's a love that I love to do. I like to go around and make sure that training is happening, education is happening the way it's supposed to be happening. And aside from that, I'm also the associate minister at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church here in San Antonio. And I actually love working with outreach. I love working with kids, or wherever else I can find myself to be busy in the church.
That's good. So how would others or yourself describe you as a person?
I think it would be outgoing. It would be outgoing, a people person, easy to get along with. I think that would be it. Dependable. I think that would be another word that and trustworthy. These are all things that I've heard before in passing, but I'm not a self-centered person, so I can't really see those things a lot of times. I just love people, and I just love to see the best out of people, and I love to see people reach their full potential. So that's what I want to do.
So on to the next bit. So just if you don't feel comfortable answering anything, that's okay. Just
sure.
Tell me, and then we'll just skip on.
All right.
So, do you have any experience dealing with racism or discrimination in growing up or in community or just around you?
Plenty. I've had plenty of issues with racism growing up as a child. Have had issues with racism as a young adult and as an adult. I'm very connected with my family, so even the experiences that they have, I feel like I've actually shared with them. I'm very connected with my friends, so what they've experienced, I've kind of taken it upon myself, again, because I love people and I don't want them to go through it. But the thing is, myself, I've gone through it, and it's been tough at times, but I grow from it.
So, for starting from your childhood, can you describe to me, or first, when you start describing how was like growing up and like your experience of racism as a child?
Well, it was very noticeable. Like I said, born in a small town of Bastrop, Louisiana, where we had a clear-cut line of what we would consider the African American side of town and the other side of town. So that was the first thing that you actually saw. I was good in that my great aunt who raised me, and she was very, very old. My great aunt who actually raised me was my great grandmother's aunt. So yeah, the lineage there was very unique in that I was raised in that type of home because the life lessons that she had seen She just kind of passed on down to us through the stories. That's why I believe in this project and what's going on, because I believe in what storytelling. One of my early years memories that I think about her is when I think about, she shared a story with me and my grandmother where on the night Dr. King was assassinated, and this was put into me at a very early age, on the night that Dr. King was assassinated, phones back then didn't have call waiting or anything like that. So what she always shared, and my grandmother always shared, was that she needed to get in touch with my grandmother. She needed to get in touch. Well, back then you had to use the operator to break the line, and once they broke the line, you would hang up and then you could call that person back. Well, when she called, she told the operator it was an emergency. The operator breaks into the line for my grandmother, clears the line, right? So when she came back to call her, they both hysterically in tears over the assassination of Dr. King. Unbeknownst to them, the operator, who obviously knew what was going on that night in America, tapped back in as they were crying and laughingly said, "I thought you said this was an emergency." So that was one of my first things that always resonated within me, because it taught me, what they shared with me was, watch your communication, watch who you're talking to, watch what you're talking to. The phone is still new, right? So we're learning, watch what you say on the phone, you're hearing these stories. So that shaped me. So I was always aware of my communications. Even now, as we film, I'm aware of what I'm saying, because I understand the nature of communication and social media, how it can be misconstrued, construed, tainted. So I was always aware of that, but that was shaped by the views of that situation.
That's very sad to hear. Just going through all that.
Mm-hmm.
So describe to me, as growing up in Louisiana, like experiencing racism at that age.
Well, I had two things that were very significant in my early education years. As a third grader in Louisiana, we took what's called the CAT test, or the California Achievement Test. During one of the tests, I had a third grade teacher who did not like me, and I really put it on the fact that it was my color. She always would pick on me about being left-handed. Anything that she could get leg up on me, she always gave me such a hard time, always such a hard time. And I really couldn't understand it. I didn't know why. I didn't understand why this woman didn't like me. So during the California Achievement Test, which is a standardized test, right? Early on, this is 1983. So when we took this test, first off, I didn't even know if it could happen, because I know things change. I get called in a couple days later to the principal's office. Now, I'm in the third grade, right? Just a young man by myself. Always taught to trust your teachers. If something happens to you, go to your teacher. But I knew that this teacher didn't like me. I was pulled in to the office with the principal, with the secretary, none of them who looked like me or looked like our people, African American. They surrounded me and they badgered me and they belittled me and told me that the results had came back, and as they reviewed the Scantrons, they realized that I had cheated on the test. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you know I cheated? Well, their reasoning was because this young man who didn't look like me, who was beside me, all of his answers looked like mine, right? Or mine looked like his. That was the rationale. But being that I was left-handed, he was right-handed, so I had the ability to look on his paper. Well, the rationale then, even as a third grader, told me, well, if he's right-handed, wouldn't he be able to look on my paper? Didn't understand it at the time, so I was actually forced to retake that test again. But one of the things that always stood out to me, they never called my mom. They never allowed me to talk to anybody. It was very hurtful. I was a kid, and I didn't know what was about to happen to me. I didn't know what the punishment was for supposedly cheating on a test, which I did not do. But here I was. Obviously, I'm being accused, and here are these great administrators who I've been taught to look up to, right? It was very hurtful. Well, got through that. I retested, scored the same thing, but they never called the other individual in. Never called him in. Moved forward to the fourth grade. The third grade teacher and the fourth grade teacher were very good friends. as I would walk down the hall, be in the classroom, they would constantly say, "There's the little cheater. There's the little cheater," when I had actually proved. So that kind of messed with my psyche, really, really bad. And I always thought I was a smart kid, right? So it messed with me really bad. But it wasn't until I got into 5th grade, I will say this, that Miss Pauline Smith, who looked like me, reminded me that I was intelligent, and I had to let go of whatever I was holding on to, because I was mad. I began to get bitter. I began to get mad. I began to not like school because of this incident that was carrying me through 2 grades and being called a cheater and everything else. It was very negative. But I was thankful that she came into my life, and she showed me what a real educator looked like.
That's good. I believe it's quite terrible having someone you look up to, just the ability all the time to grade you, think you're nothing. That's just terrible.
Yes, yes.
So now going from elementary to say middle school, right?
Mm-hmm.
How was just describe that? Like, was there any like serious moments in your life?
It was kind of crazy going to middle school, because one of the things I'll say about middle school is it's a good time to see growth spurts, right? So one of the things that you saw racism in this town was we came from Grambling was right down the street, right? So I knew great athletes, and I knew what great athletes looked like. Southern University down the road, I knew what great athletes looked like. I knew what they could do. My mom was a Southernite, and my dad was a Gramblingite, both who were very active with their colleges. But the thing about it was, you weren't allowed to play necessarily the position that you wanted if the other kid who didn't look like you could play that position first. So this was still the days of, we didn't have middle school black quarterbacks, but I knew several who were better than the one we had. And but the linebacker that got all the calls and who dictated, because he was a thinking man. He could think the plays through on offense. He could think the plays through. So what I thought I was going to play, and I thought I had the ability to play, I was kind of pushed back to the side, and that was a wake-up call for me. Like, man, this is crazy. You know, we're supposed to be out there on the field, and we knew it, but we steady had people in front of us who were not as athletic as, and we saw that there would be a sacrifice for winning in order to put people in places that we liked. One of the things that stood out that middle school years, though, was my 8th grade year. I had grown up with this young lady all my life, and I didn't know anything negative about her. I'd never seen a negative bone about it. But one time, this particular time, I was in Miss LaDonna Fall's class, and what happened was, this young lady, as I was leaning over another desk talking to another student, she came and she just stopped in the middle of the aisle. And I kind of looked to my left, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And this young lady, she said, "I need you to move." And I thought it was a joke. So I said, "No, you can go ahead and go around me." She said, "No, you will move. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know what's going on." Still, I'm thinking, why is she playing like this? So I said, "No, you can go around me." Well, she said some words that would change our relationship and the relationship of a lot of people around me. In that classroom, she looked at me, and she just said the words, "You just remember this. My forefathers slaved your forefathers." I don't know where it came from. I don't know if she had been having conversations at home, but I learned a couple things that day. People have conversations at home that will seep up in their spirit as well. We teach our kids, but I responded negatively as well, and that's the learning thing that I got out of it. I was heated. I was disappointed in what she had said. Didn't know what to do, but what did I do? I responded in a negative way. I took off my belt, and I held my belt up to her, and I said, "Well, here's your chance to try it now," and I offered her my belt. She walked off. This was elevated to the principal. I was put up for suspension. Not because of what she said, it was because of my response to it. But I learned that as an African American, we have to respond differently. We have to respond differently. I failed that particular day. There was no recourse for her. There was no punishment. There was no talking to her. It was strictly, this is her story. And this was his response. It was all about my response. Thankfully, I did not get suspended. My dad was one of the teachers at the school, but I did, old school, right? I got a paddling by my dad for the sake of the school for me not to get suspended. But he had to paddle me in front of my class to punish me so I wouldn't get suspended, in front of the same person who insulted not only me, but my dad and my classmates. That's hurtful. And we're still answering to that today.
So going real quick back to athletics. So coming into like this day and age, how do you feel? Since I know that you have a son as well, if you were to get athletics, do you think it would still be the same thing or a little bit more different?
I think it's a little bit more different now. I think people like going back to the quarterback situation. I think the Doug Williams and the Steve McNairs and the Colin Kaepernicks, they've knocked down the door of what the old school guard said. You can't think this game. You can't play this game. The Russell Wilsons, they've proven that system is wrong. So do I think that my son could play any position he wants to? I do. I think he could play any position. I think, but even when you look at not only can he play any position, now he can really play any sport that he really wants to. And I think that's what we have to understand and really embrace our kids. We don't have to even give them the same sport that we had and that we were this was the only game that we were taught that we could play. He can go play rugby. He can go play any other sport that he wants to, because we see that when we apply ourselves, we can think, we can play. And I'm hopeful that no matter what he does athletically, he'll thrive at it. He'll thrive at it.
And also with that, like for parents, encouraging the kids to play sports, like for any race or any ethnicity there is in cultures, do you think for any kid from any background, they can play any sport that they choose, despite them being probably discriminated because of it?
I believe the discrimination still exists. Like I said, now that transitions right into high school. So when I went to high school, I actually left. I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, moved to the historically black community called the Cooper Road, USA. It was one time the second largest self-supporting community in the U.S., second to Harlem, basically. But this community gave me so much of who I am today, and I give it so much love back, because when I got there, one of the things that the coaches taught me, and they're talking about discrimination, right, was when you're preparing a kid, right? When you're preparing a kid at a predominantly white school, whatever, you give them the rules, right? You give them the rules, you give them the plays, and you tell them to execute. But unfortunately, unfortunately, you have to teach at African American schools. These are the rules. This is the execution of it. This is how you'll play through the refs. Unfortunately, I saw so many times where we prepared as best as we could as athletes, only to play against the referees included. And that was hard. But had I not been prepared to play against them, I would have responded going back to my 8th grade days, right, in that negative manner. So I knew that I had to not be at 100%, I had to be 110. I had to outthink what could be called. I had to watch proper placement of my hands. If I'm playing basketball, I had to make sure that I didn't push. You're really thinking more than actually playing a lot of times. But it's a wonderful thing, because I believe that sports sets us up for those who participate. When we utilize them correctly, they set us up for the real world, because in the real world, you're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to tackle things a little bit different. You know that discrimination exists. You know that there may be times where you have to be a little bit better than your competitor. So discrimination, did it exist in sports? Will it continue to exist? As long as racism is taught, it will exist. Whoa. I guess we need to move.
So yeah, I like that. And so I know that you said that you moved high school, or you moved from town to another high school, right?
Yes.
And you're in much more of a black community.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that it made you who you are, right? So if you didn't move high schools and you still stay where you were, you think that would affect you into who you're becoming now, or be a totally different person?
Oh man, I'd be a totally different person. The community itself gave me an opportunity that I would have never had. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that I did was like I jumped immediately into, I did the class announcements during the day, right? Mm-hmm. So the morning announcements. Well, I was pulled in by she's going on to be with the Lord, Miss Brown, who's our librarian. And this is 1991. And she says, hey, you know what, you're doing the announcements, but let me throw this at you. Now, this is 1991. It's unprecedented. She brings me this book, right? And she says, hey, look at this. And it's a history book of Black history facts. Black history facts. I would have never gotten it at the other school, right? And she said, think about putting it in your announcements every day. And I said, wow, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So at the end of every announcement, I started what was called the Journey into 365 Days of Black History, and I would give a Black history fact. What I noticed was all the kids would come and just in random conversation, and you know, you're having a conversation about class or whatever, and then it would be, man, hey, you know what you were talking about this morning? Man, I had no idea. And I realized it was not only shaping me just to say it, but everybody that was under the sound of that voice, I would have never gotten that opportunity, one, to put out the Black history facts, two, to even learn them myself, because you're steady in that defensive mode, trying to make sure you don't rock the boat, right? Well, there was no boat to rock. There was the ability to be confident in who you are and what you look like and what you wore and everything, because everybody was their own individual. And everybody was respecting each other, and I absolutely loved it. Would I have been the same person I am today had I not? No, I don't believe I would have been. I would have been still playing second fiddle to somebody who I knew was not as academically inclined as me, nor as athletically inclined as me. So I'm thankful to Green Oaks High School for what it gave to me in the Cooper Road community.
So now from going from high school into college.
Yes.
Can I ask what kind of college do you attend? PWI, HBCU?
Oh man, let me tell you, I actually started off by mistake, and I say by mistake, at a PWI. Can you believe that? I actually started off at a PWI, and the reason I say it was by mistake because I had not properly filled out everything as far as my student loan paperwork and everything else. I actually bypassed scholarships that I was offered, and I look back on that and I think about how God has carried me through, but everything you go through is for a reason, right? So when I started off at this PWI, had one of the most horrible experiences, and I ended up leaving the school before the year was even out. One of the most ugly experiences I experienced, racism. I was in a public speaking class. I was in a public speaking class, and this young lady who was white, this is 1992, so this was the year of wrap skirts. Mm-hmm. So this was a wrap skirt. So for those who know what wrap skirts is, well, she would always turn to me, and she would turn and face me, but she would play with this wrap skirt, and I would always look away, always look away, always look away. I was doing really good in public speaking. I've always been, prone to public speaking in the church. I absolutely loved it. I'm not afraid of crowds and whatnot. So she's doing this, and I'm trying to look away. I go out after class, and I'm thinking life is good, right? She finds me in the dining facility, and I'm eating by myself. She comes up, and she's just laughing. And I'm like, what's going on? She said, the professor kept her after school. The professor who was also over the debate team, he was over the debate team, he actually told her that he saw me sexually harass her. And if she wanted to press charges, she could. So I'm trying to find the comedy in all of this, right? So I'm like, are you serious, right? So she's like, yeah, he told me I could press charges on you, but he don't know it. And I said, no, but did you tell him that that was you doing that? And she just laughed like it was nothing. So I'm trying to protect me. I left and I went back to the professor. Well, when I found him in his office in the English department, as I find him, he's actually in the class, sitting in the office with my English professor, my English 101 professor. And I'm just like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And he just yelled out, no. And I was just like, sir, I just wanted to talk to you. I just saw the young lady. I called her by name and I said, hey, he's like, no, I saw what you did and I will be elevating it. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? So he just basically closed the door in my face. So everybody in the department is looking like, what's going on down there, right? So my next assignment for my speech went from A's to either low D's, F. Public speaking is very subjective. It is a subjective course. His term was things like too preachy, too this. But these are all subjectives, right? But it's a subjective course, let's be honest, right? But what happened was, not only was that happening, but in English, now my papers were coming back D's, F's, from the same instructor I was getting B's and A's from. They had a conversation after that, and it just shaped me. Full disclosure, my cousin was in my English class with me, all right? And I assisted my cousin in writing his papers from day one. His grade never changed. It was the exact same writing. And I saw the difference.
That's terrible.
But I couldn't say anything because I was assisting my cousin, all right? He's still in the class and passing, so I ended up leaving. I got a phone call. I ended up leaving that school I caught the flu, but I just decided just to go ahead and resign. I ended up resigning, moving back home. While at home, resigned with the flu, knowing that this is not the place that I shouldn't have been. I see it as God made a way for me. I got a phone call, just a random phone call out of the blue. An assistant coach at one of the community colleges over at Bossier Parish Community College at the time. He called me, he said, hey, I heard you were back in town. They're having a junior college all-star game and I want you to play in it. Now I'm operating it right now at about anywhere between 100 and 101, 102 fever, right? And I said, well, when is it? He says, tomorrow. I can't play, right? But God told me to go and just go. I went out there and I played through fever because that's what we're asked to do, right? We're asked to go the extra mile as African Americans, to play through when we have it hardest. And I was blessed to come out of that with the offer to go to Southern University of Shreveport and began my career again in basketball. And life picked back up, and I'm extremely grateful to the coaching staff and those at Southern University of Shreveport for picking me up. Yes.
So, just to go back real quick, I know it says about wrap skirts. Can you explain to people who don't know what a wrap skirt is?
So basically, a wrap skirt is just what it sounds like. It is a wrap. If you can imagine a burrito, if you want to say. So it's just like a blanket. You take one wrap over and you take another wrap over. And actually, if the wrap would look like so. So if you move this, to cover, or you can move it to open. The young lady who obviously was trying to show her legs off, that was when I looked out the corner of my eye, because as I was sitting facing this way, she was actually turned with her legs facing me, so I would have to turn right to see it. And when I saw it, she was just constantly, trying to do the butterfly effect, if you want to say, to get my attention. And again, these are little bitty, old school desks with the steel, Yeah. But so she turned intentionally to get that view. And it was just, so that's the wrap skirt. They didn't, I don't think they hung around that long, but it was for a while. But that was a very unfortunate situation. But her finding the comedy in it, and she was an education major. Mm-hmm. We were all education majors, and I just wonder how she took care of me as a friend, how is she taking care of students.
And so, just from your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
How do you think coming today, like if that were happened today to another student, how would you feel as an educator?
As an educator, and that's one of the things I do in the Air Force, I felt like I was called to do that, right? Because I wanted to make sure that things that happened to me while I was in my K through 12 years in college, I also, when I joined the Air Force, education still takes place, right? And I want to make sure that whether it be pedagogy or andragogy, I just want to make sure that even adults know that they should be treated a certain way in class. You should have the same opportunities. There should be two sides to the story, right? Instead of just getting that one side of the story. So that's where I'm at with it. Educators should always take the time to listen rather than to judge, and don't hold grudges. That's the biggest thing, because they can cloud your judgment.
And so, so for the Air Force, when exactly did you join the Air Force?
What is it I do in the Air Force?
No, like, when did you join?
I joined originally in 1997. I joined in 1997 to 2001, my first tour, April 2001. I got out of the Air Force. Later on, if you remember the time frame, that was April of 01 when I actually separated. But in September of 01, we remember the fatal date of 9/11, right? So 9/11/01, I actually felt helpless at my new job that I was working with in the civilian sector. I felt like I was sitting on my hands. I felt like I couldn't help my fellow brothers and sisters in arms. So what I did was I ran immediately to the recruiter and I said, put me back in the game. Unfortunately, it didn't happen right off the top. And I had to wait until October of 03 to actually come back in. So, but it was well worth the wait. So 97, still what was considered my pay date, but that 2-year little gap, and I did do reserve, allowed me to now retire in September of 19, and that will make actually 22 years.
Wow.
Yes.
And so when you first joined the Air Force, right?
Yes.
What was it like? Just any experiences of discrimination or racism when joining the Air Force?
Let me tell you, James, the thing about joining the Air Force was, I go back to the Cook Road experience, right? I go back to Green Oaks, and it was easy. Basic training was easy. You know why it was easy for me? Because the yelling, the picking, everything that they were going to throw at you to break you, I had already experienced. My coaches had already set me up to not expect anything, but to give everything. So you tell me what to say, and that's what I'll say. You tell me where to go, and that's where I go. But I'm going to make sure that I do it with the best of my ability. I'm going to do it like no other, because that's what I was telling, because I was also playing against the eyes. I was playing against those referees, right? So not only are you giving me the verbal command to do something, I'm also knowing that others are watching, ready to pick me apart, so I have to do it the best I can. So they set me up for success, if you want to say. Had I been just handed something, it probably would have been a negative experience for me. But when I came in, I was that experience of everything I had been through and what to expect, I looked for it. I actually looked for it. So that was a good thing for me. But I was also, I can say I had a great experience in that I was supported in a different way that I didn't know, and I knew that it was only God. So one of the experiences that I had was, there was only 5 of us in like a group of 45 who were African American, and we have different details that they would choose us for, right? So they would send you here and send you there. Well, we have what's called high vis, high visibility experiences that they send you to. You're going to be in front of this leader, and you're going to be in front of this leader. So what they do is they try to choose the cream of the crop. So what they did was, for each experiences out of this group of 45, they were choosing all these kids, and they would always choose one African American, right? So they would choose me out of that 5. So when the third time that it happened, I was the third. It was the third choice, right? I actually felt the need to call the brothers together, and I actually said, "Hey, man, let me talk to y'all. I can go to them and tell them that I want one of y'all to go? I said, because I don't want y'all to think that I'm trying to, outshine anybody or anything like that. And James, I tell you, one of the things that happened was when I did that, they corrected me so quick. They said, no, man, you're supposed to be doing that. You can do this, Pat. Go do it. We're okay. You go do it. But when you come back, just do what you always do and show us love. That built me up like no other. To have your brother support you, not judge you, I felt like it was family. So, yeah.
So just like, so I do believe that there are other people with different backgrounds in the Air Force with training. So wherever you're getting drilled at or just yelled at, and from everyone's experiences and your own, do you feel like that you're all equal in a way?
I feel like we're equal when it's practiced correctly. If you put the right leader in front, I think that leadership does shape attitudes, right? And unfortunately, I had some bad leaders, and I had some very good leaders. In the bad leaders, in the Air Force, I've actually seen one leader in particular who was horrible. This man, and actually he wasn't even, believe it or not, he was not, as we would say, he was not white. He was actually Hispanic, and he saw it himself as he took on the nature of the white races, in that he loved that culture so much that he wanted to treat us like they did. So much so that he went out of his way to, even when he had the other Hispanics that worked with us, he would speak Spanish to them and tell them that they weren't part, as in Spanish, he would say, they're not part of our clique. They're not part, and he would say it in Spanish, which prompted me to go get Rosetta Stone, right? But no, he was intentional about it. He was very, very intentional. And even to this day, he and I are not friends on social media or anything. He's since retired. But the people that he could not break or shake, through them, I watch him and his comments, and they are extremely jaded toward the racist side. And it's just amazing that even a culture where African Americans are tried by a system that we originally thought to be originated from what we consider the white side, it's other cultures also that actually strengthen that system. They actually give it the arms and the legs and the feet as well. So yeah, did I experience it from every side in the Air Force? Yeah, I did. But with the family, there was much more love than there was hate.
So real quick to add like a little side note. So how do you feel about people people who aren't white try to act white? How do you feel about that?
That people aren't white who try to act white?
Yeah.
It hurts sometimes to see, because if you know that if they just embraced who they were, they'd be a whole lot better. They'd be a whole lot happier. And I think that's the thing about it. The word I want to use is joy and peace. You can seek to become something that you're not so much. You can be it, but it's not natural. So therefore, you may get a spark of happiness out of it, but you keep having to look up more of it to try to remind yourself of what you're trying to be. When I can wake up and just be me and experience that peace, experience that joy, right? So I feel I really feel more sorry than anything for them, that they don't get a chance to experience who they are, and that they lie to themselves when they don't even have to lie to themselves, because the truth is we have a whole system that's set up to lie to you. So you don't have to lie to yourself. Don't double up. Just be who you are. Experience your own joy. Experience your own peace.
And so with that added, let's say for vice versa, since I know that I don't mean to be racist or anything, in this time, white people have tried to act black, have black or stuff like that. How do you feel about that?
Again, I really feel sorry for them as well, because I believe, I'm of the belief that there is one creator, right? I'm of the belief that there is one creator. But for those who try to act black, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that to be accepted by us. You don't have to do that to be loved by us. When we look at civil rights as a whole, I look at it from a standpoint of civil rights was not just a black thing. We wanted the rights that every American had, right? But civil rights, again, is not a American value just by itself. This is a world where everybody deserves civil rights as who you are. So you don't have to try to be me. You don't have to try to talk like me. It's in a lot of ways, though, I believe it's disrespectful. It's disingenuous to try to be me. You know, be you. Be you. Accept me. And one of the things I cannot stand is people who try to devalue my culture by being me. You know, and I say devalue because the only me that you want to be is that of hip hop, that of a culture that you specifically say, this is me. You want to wear your pants down because this is what you do. You want to twerk because this is you. We're so much more than that. We're so much more than that. You want to be a philosopher? Well, guess what? That's me. Look at your history books. That's me. You want to be a doctor? That's who. Be like me. If you want to be like me, you want to be an educator? Be like me. You know, that, and I think that's what upsets me the most, because you put me in this one box, and we're so much more than that. We're so much more creative. We've done so much for this nation and for this world from the start of creation to where we are now. So if you want to be me, first recognize the greatness that I've given to this world.
So with that, I like that. It's amazing. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And so do you think, like, for any like cultural background or whatever, do you think each side thinks or sees like one side of it as like for Asians, they think they're all smart and all that. For Black, we think we're all ghetto, and for white, we're all like rich and noble. You think everything's like just one side, not like not seeing the whole thing?
I could agree with that. What I call that is the bubble, right? And I'm gonna just stick with us as Blacks. I consider it because I deal with it better than go everything, because I believe other cultures have this same issue. I call it the black bubble. You're in this black bubble where, James, I'll tell you, if you don't eat this, you aren't black enough. If you don't watch this, you must not be black. If you don't listen to this type of music, you must be black. Again, going back to it, this bubble, you see it one way. You see it one way, but we're so diverse as a people, and other cultures do the same thing. If they don't carry themselves a certain way, then they disrespect their culture. If they don't marry a certain way, they disrespect their culture, and they don't allow for growth, right? And we do the same thing, and I believe that's what racists bank on. A lot of times, those cultural norms that they made, because the norm is we're so different, we can do so many things, right? So we have to step out of our thought of that bubble of what we look like and what this culture looks like. And when you do that, we can grow. One of the things I hate is when I hear, y'all wasn't worried about this. Y'all not helping with this. And I look at the Black community, when I hear people say that, we have so many grassroots organizations that are doing so many things in so many areas. But the minute it hits a big spotlight, right, what we do is we take it and we say, oh, now y'all concerned about it. No. As a people, we've been working on that. But you didn't know that because you were too busy in your bubble. You didn't know that we were attacking human trafficking in the Black neighborhood. You didn't know that we were looking for our young sisters that are missing. You didn't know that because you were watching Love and Hip Hop. You didn't know that because you were doing this and that. And it's not an attack on hip hop, but what I'm saying is this is what the American culture has put in front of us as our norm. So we're stuck in this bubble to think that we're supposed to watch this and only watch this type of show and only listen to this type of music. When the diversity of us is being missed, the bubble speaks out and they speak the loudest.
And so I know earlier you said that you're big on social media.
Yes.
And with that, we're like for like new music coming out, TV shows, and I know that some like for kids, especially young ones, when they see on TV, they think that is exactly what that is, but on the outside it's something totally different. So how do you feel about that? Like social media representing like different people.
I think social media. I always say one thing I say about social media is control the narrative. You get the ability to control the narrative. Unfortunately, and you hear me say that again, the narrative that we sometimes put forward is about what we surround ourselves with. I don't see certain things on my page because I've surrounded myself with like-minded people. But from time to time, I actually have people, I've gone to school with in high school who've gone a different route. And I see what they post and I see what they share. And I'm like, you're a part of the issue. You're a part of the problem. You can control this whole media thing. That's what it's about. This is your media. Control it. Tell the people what story you want to tell. And that's why I can appreciate social media, but at the same time, what's what we call viral, typically something that's viral, that goes viral, the typical viral when it comes to us is something negative, unfortunately, because that's what we chose to share on our media. Look at this. I think back to as a kid, right? When something was nasty or you ate it, you're outside playing, it's like, oh, this is nasty, taste this. Why would I taste that if you just told me it's nasty? You're not gonna bite that. You're not gonna taste that. It's the same with your media. This is your media. Look at this foolishness. Here, look at it. No, don't share that with me. I don't want that. I want something that sows into my spirit that makes me better, that makes my community better. So when we control the narrative, we'll be a whole lot better. This project, this HBCU oral history project, to me, that's changing and controlling the narrative, and that I appreciate.
And with that, so I know that you have a young son, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so do you have any fears, concern when he grows older and starts learning about social media?
I do, because I want to make sure that, let's be honest, we can't be everywhere at all times. And I can only control what media that we give him. We can put parental guidances on if we give him a phone when he grows up, on our computers at home. But guess what? These other kids have phones too, and it just takes a look over the shoulder to be exposed to something that we may not have wanted him to be exposed to. So that is the scary part for me, is making sure that other homes are just as concerned with what their kids are watching and taking in as well. So that's my main concern.
And so that so I know you're married. So going to your family. Has your wife ever told you anything any experience about her dealing with racism in any shape or form?
So my wife and I, she has been one of the luckiest people I've ever met before in my life, right? So to not experience so much. Has she experienced it? Yes, but not as much, and I'm thankful for that because she can give my child a different perspective as well. And I think you have to have two sides to teach, right? I always call it 23-23, you know what I'm saying? He has 46 chromosomes, I got 23 to nurture, and she has 23 to nurture, and the experiences are supposed to be a little bit different, I think. So I think one of the things that she shared with me that always disturbed her, especially when it came to the work environment, was that when she graduated college from HBCU as well, when she got a master's, especially from when she got it from Grambling, when she started in the work community, she worked at a store in the mall where it really concentrated on like business attire and everything else, right? So she worked there. So when she would go to her new job, which was, based on her degree when she was working for the city, her boss would intentionally tear at her about a raise because she was intentionally not wanting to really just give her anything because she felt like you already dressing, so you must be doing something else. It was almost like I'm gonna give myself an excuse not to reward you for the work that you do. And if I gotta worry about so you want me not to dress nice and come in and just plug away? You want to feel a certain way over your worker. And I think that's very negative, and it affected her because she thought all she had to do was go in and work and everybody was going to be happy. She didn't think that dressing nice would be a negative against her. And that was one of the things that she experienced. So, but I've encouraged her even then, just be who you are. Be who you are. Because young girls, I can say a lot of young ladies, even at the church, because the attire that she wears is a covered attire. It's business attire and everything else. And the young ladies admire her for her spirit, but they also admire her dress, and everything's not exposed. So maybe if she had came in dressed and exposed, she'd been all right because she looked typical. So that was one of the experiences that she shares with me.
And so going back to that, like, do you think everyone has a basis of how people should wear certain things based on like their backgrounds?
I think they do, whether it be clothes, hair, facial hair, whatever. I think when we dress a certain way, if we dress, we can look at being too sharp and say, okay, they must. It can be looking at a couple of different ways. If you're too sharp, you must be doing something else. What are you doing outside of work? Why can't I just be investing my money properly? Why can't I just be finding a good sale? Why do I have to, look a certain way? My hair. I was actually pulled in by a boss probably about a year and a half ago. Typically, I wear my hair short, tapered, waved up. This is something new that just happened to grow up. But it's not the first time I've done it. But the last time I did, I let it grow out a little bit. And my boss, who is white, pulled me in the office and said, "I need to talk to you." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm okay." She said, "You just haven't been yourself lately." I said, "Well, nothing in my attitude had changed. Nothing in my attitude had changed." I said, "Well, I'm doing my work. What's going on?" She said, "No, it's your hair. But you said you're not the same." She was really talking about she needed me to cut my hair. And I was very disturbed by that. And I was just thinking, has it come down to this? Has it come down to just my hair being the deciding factor on how I do my job? So I think we get preference and what's in regulation confused many times.
So go back to your friends. Have your friends told you any of their own experiences with racism?
They have, and I've shared experiences with them. And I'll use my good friend Dex, for example. One night we left to head back to Grambling, and it was a very, very cold night. It was a very cold night. Unfortunately, we ran out of gas about midnight, and I'm talking about it was in the 30s. Neither one of us were properly dressed because we thought we were going to make it back to campus, right? Had a sweatshirt on. It said this exit was, actually it's my wife's hometown, which is exit 61, and Grambling is actually 81 on I-20. Well, 2 miles to exit 61, we ran out of gas. We immediately start our trek, and we're trying to get there, man. And we're cold as all get out. When we get inside, I said, well, you know what? It was my girlfriend at the time, she was the wife at the time. She was my girlfriend, but she was, we started into the town, which is another really like 2.5 miles before you actually get to the city. Police officer was coming down the road. So we had, when he came, he stopped, rolled down the window. He sees 2 freezing kids. We're still kids. And when he rolled down the window, he looked at us. We had a stick in our hand. We had a stick and with rocks in our hand because there was so much moving in the woods and everything else. We just didn't know, right? So his question to us was, hey, boys, where y'all going? Coon hunting? So we were like, no, sir, we're not going coon hunting, you know, being respectful. No, sir, our car ran out of gas 2 miles back off the interstate. We're just trying to know if we can come in, use your phone, and call our friends down at Grambling so somebody can come get us. He said, well, the town's closed. The next exit is 8 miles. So I said, well, being that I had been there before, I said, well, but the police office is right there when you come in. He said, the police office is closed. And he said it with an emphasis. The next town is 8 miles. All right, sir. I said, sir, there's a corner store up there and there's a payphone. I know that's up there. Can we use the payphone? You can do what you want to do. And pulls off. We make our way into the town, freezing. And called our friends, and it was one of the scariest situations. Now we see the police officer come back. He goes into the police station, which is across from where the phone is. We've made the call. He looks out the window. We can see he's trying to see where we are. He makes a phone call. Next thing you know, we just see this white van pull up, and just two white gentlemen are sitting in there, and they're kind of like sitting outside the store, and they're watching us, just watching us. We don't know if this is our last night. We don't know. It was one of the scariest nights of my life. I don't know what's in the back of this van. Will I be in the back of this van? And they just kind of watched. And I knew that they knew we had made a call, and I think that was our saving grace. Probably about the time the guys came down and scooped us up, we were laying on top of each other, basically, just trying to keep warm. It was a hard experience. Yeah, I thought I was gonna die. I'm bradycardic, so my heart rate is really low. So when I'm cold, I go into a shiver, especially still when my body's trying to keep warm, and my heart rate is dropped as low on a resting rate as low as 38 to 40. Yes. So couple that. He saved my life. Yeah.
So going back to that cop. So what was your perspective? You think what could have happened if things didn't go the way it would have gone?
I think I could have died out there from hypothermia, going into shock. But the other thing is, I just think he was operating in a negative way. And I think about my son, right? What if that was my son? This was 95, so we didn't have no cell phones. We had to use 1-800-COLLECT. You had to pray somebody was there. You know what I'm saying? You can't catch them on the run. If ain't nobody there back in the day, that's your call. So you literally had to hope somebody answered the phone back in the day. So that was hard. We didn't have a calling card. And we just, praying somebody could even accept a collect call. So it was hard. It was hard. That cop, looking back, he could have cost us our lives, but at the same time, I don't know what his angle was when he made that other call, and to see that van set up across from us and not even confront them. But he knew them, I guarantee you that. So.
And so if you were white, how do you think that would have gone?
Oh man, I'd have been inside that station, whatever coffee we're drinking, that's what we're sipping on that night to keep warm. That's what it was. And I shared it with my wife, and I said, hey, you know what? This is what happened in your hometown. And she was like, I can believe it. I can believe it. My father-in-law, rest his soul, he was a coach at that time, and I shared it with him, and he felt the same way, like, welcome. Unfortunate, but welcome.
So I want to ask, so was there any like very impactful things in your life that kind of changed your course on your views on like how America is on racism?
A whole lot of them. I think the biggest one for me was just my relationships with my family, my great-grandmother, my great-aunt who passed away, my mother and her experience, just my family, just how we would have these talks and the positivity of the talks and the sharing of those negative experiences. They really helped to shape who I am. I think the most recent, though, had to be the election of President Barack Obama. To me, what I saw in the election of President Barack Obama that I take from it was that there was a sincere desire to unite because blacks weren't the only ones that voted for President Obama. We saw people come together like never before. We saw people who were ready and willing to see that change and that hope was living. We saw that, and that was huge for me. In the same breath, I can say we saw that there was a faction still left, right, that houses very influential offices and very influential businesses and everything else, and they came together and they saw us as a people trying to unite as Americans, and they started a firestorm of hate and racism like never before. So we can attribute it to our current administration, but I have to go back to the election of President Barack Obama and the meeting of Senator Mitch McConnell and that group when they met together, and they said nothing that he does will prosper. Nothing that he does. We won't pass anything. And what we cannot forget is the split, the pure split of the GOP. I mean, that GOP split, and when they started the Tea Party, I mean, the very name of itself, right, was to overthrow the government, right? It was to plant a seed of hate that just took off. It took off, but I held on to what President Obama, and I still hold on to what President Obama showed us as a nation that what we could be. Unfortunately, we saw the Tea Party, and I believe that the current administration saw that, and as an opportunist that he is, he took that and he said, I'm gonna ride that out. And when he rolled it out, when the next election came, when 2016 election came, they could not put out that fire. They were like, hey, it's good. We're gonna get the House back. We're gonna get the White House back. And it's like, nope. This is what we started. This is what we're going to ride on. We don't have to do that anymore. The Tea Party is back within the party. There is no Tea Party anymore. We're okay. Nope. We're going to keep this separation thing going. And man, it's the ugliest that we've seen it, right? But I still go back to the hope that I know that they're still there that we saw in the election of 2008.
And so going back to like, talking about the experiences with your family, all that. So going back to how does it feel telling your story to me today, like, and just for others to hear?
I want others to hear the story. I want people to know that there's a sincere desire to get past this thing called racism. I want people to know that there is not one type of African American. There are many types, and we all desire the same things that every other culture. We want the best for our families. We want families. We want the structure that is a family. We want education. We want to be able to provide for those we love. We want to be able to walk down the street without feeling like we're being profiled, or walking in any store and being profiled. We want to be able to not get pulled. We want to get pulled over and get treated just like everybody else. I want the same assistance if my child is cold in the street that you would give any other person. That's why I tell my stories. So maybe if somebody who says, you know what, I was wrong, I don't want to practice those practices anymore, I want to be better. So maybe when they hear these stories that are collectively told, they'll understand that how it affects us negatively and how truthfully we can be better.
And so after all these experiences you have
Mhm.
from early childhood and into now into your age, what justice have you sought out?
Justice, I think I haven't sought any justice for myself. I think the justice that I sought was to educate myself so I could help others. Because I think once you experience something, I think once you truly experience something, the true justice is to go forward and make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody else, right? So that's what I've sought. I've sought to be better, sought to operate in integrity, to give others the justice that they deserve, to make sure that the people who are around me understand that I am not biased. When it comes to justice, I think everybody deserves it. So whether I'm sitting in the classroom, whether I'm inspecting, I want everybody to have the same justice that everybody's afforded.
And so in today's world, there's so many issues going on with people getting killed or just riots all over. What's one essential thing you think we would need to have justice for all and to supposedly stop racism in America?
Not just to just talk about it, but to attack it. You know, I don't think that we do a good job as a nation of holding our lawmakers accountable to the follow through, the follow through. So dealing in the medical environment, right? If there was a disease that popped up that we had not seen in a while, that would spot up on the CDC's list, right? But then if we saw another 2 and 3, they say, time out. There's a disease going on, possible epidemic, pandemic. We got to stop this. That's how America operates. Everything that we see, that's how America operates. If we see too many people doing a certain thing, we set a certain law into place, right? We have to hold those who practice racism accountable. We have to hold them accountable. But if they don't see themselves being held accountable in a court of law, it strengthens the next one to, these are not lone wolf situations anymore. When you're seeing racist acts going on, this is an epidemic. You know, every time I turn around, I see somebody getting shot. When are we going to change laws? When are we going to give out punishments that are going to be, impactful to change the negative that exists in policing, in judge sentencing, a true prison reform for all, so we have to look at that. So I hope that happens.
And so I know you mentioned in times of crisis. So why do you think in times of crisis we all come together, but with stuff like what happens out in America in all the states or whatever, why do you think it's so different?
Now, when you say times of crisis, we come together, do you mean America or is just us as a people?
Just America, as people, from whatever background, we all come together to fight one common foe. But with times of kids getting shot and people losing their lives and all that, why do you think it's so different?
We need each other. I think we need each other. But I think what happens is we always knew we needed each other, right? It's easier to fight with you than to fight against you, right? So I'll pull you in on a fight I need you with, right? But then I'm gonna push you to the side when I don't need you. I'm gonna push you to the side when I don't need you. That's a negative. But in crisis, we come together. Because the truth is, I call it the neighborhood watch effect, right? So when they break into my house because I'm African American, it's not an issue. But I thought it was a neighborhood watch. But when they break in your house, hey, we got to come together. It's like, man, that's what I've been telling you the whole time. They breaking in houses. When we attack America, that's the house. That's the house where we come together. But when I've been telling you they've been doing it to my house the whole time, you don't want to come together with me. America has to realize that all of their citizens are worthy of protecting. America has to understand that coming together is not just a time of crisis thing, it's a time to prevent crisis. And that's one of the things that I hope that we can really understand, that crisis will happen, but crisis is very much preventable. We have to just rely on each other, even when there is no crisis.
And with that, is there any societal changes that you think that should be made to hopefully strengthen our relations with other races? Like,
I think education. Education is definitely the way to go. And I'm talking about not just Black history sharing of facts, but true history, where we understand just even the telling of the story, where we often hear that they brought slaves from Africa, and we have to, if we could just even get people to understand that slaves did not come from Africa. If we can say, hey, no, slaves didn't come from Africa. Fathers came from Africa. Mothers came from Africa. Children came from Africa. Doctors, lawyers, warriors, kings, all came from Africa. They were men and women who had lives, who had people who loved them, who had their own homes, who had their own land, who had their own profession and skills. That's who came from Africa. When we start to tell the story from the beginning on how things are, you'll understand and appreciate me better, because America still thinks that I came from nothing. And that's the farthest from the truth. That is the farthest from the truth. But if you look at me as I came from nothing, you would automatically assume that any little thing that I get, I should be appreciative of. But I can't be appreciative of everything, because I know I deserve so much more. I know I'm worth it. I know I'm worth it. So if we can just make sure that America understands who is with them from the get-go. Because if you give somebody a little something, you're thinking, man, look what I gave you, man. You better be appreciative. I was already there. I was already there. You can't make me appreciate something I already had. Not to get biblical, but I live on the precept that it says that when Jesus was taken up and he went to go fast, it says that the devil came to tempt him. And one of the things that always stands out to me, he said he looked over the kingdoms. He said, look at all these kingdoms. If you would just bow before me, I'll give you all of this. I created it. It's mine. What do you mean if I bow before you, I can have it? It's mine. That's where we are as America. We're steady being asked as a people to bow down for the things that are ours. We're already great. I need every American to understand that. Every American to understand, just as important as your DNA is to you, and how it takes you back to your ancestors, whether they be in Europe or whatnot, mine are just as powerful as they take me back to the motherland. All right? So that's what I want them to know. If we could just tell the story from the beginning to understand, I believe that we'll get where they go. That's going to be a tough call, though. Yeah, it's going to be a tough call, because I think it'll be hard for people to really appreciate it. And again, going back to those factions that still exist, they would fight that tooth and nail.
And with all that you said, so there are going to be obstacles that are going to come in the way of that happening. And what obstacles do you think could possibly stop that from happening?
The factions that don't want the story to be told, because one of the things that education frees, right? One of the things I go to my brother Bob Marley. Bob Marley tells us education frees us from slavery. Emancipation frees us from slavery, but none but ourselves can free our mind. That is the thing. Emancipation, proclamation, freed us from slavery. So that is the appreciative part, right? But when we free our minds, to free our minds is not just to let go and you put anything in it, it's to put the right thing in it, right? So allowing the right people to get up and do the teaching, allowing the right people to give the correct history. Because what I've seen people who want to teach the culture, but teach it from a negative perspective. It's like, yeah, that's part of it, but that's not all it. Where did you get this education from? Because the delivery is everything as well. So I would say just those factions that still exist who will no doubt insert themselves into the new process as we would want it. Then the other thing is too, infighting. I believe infighting would be an issue as well. One of the things, going back to the neighborhood watch thing, one of the things I always tell African Americans, one of the things I believe that we suffer from is the neighborhood watch factor. As a African American, I don't believe that when a house is broken into, it's broken into because it's a Christian home, a Muslim home, a Buddhist home, or a Hebrew Israelite home or whatnot. They see you as African American, they see you as black, right? So the infighting has to cease when we're talking about what is it that we need as a people. We need better housing. We need better loans from the banks. We need support for our businesses and everything else. So we can stop the infighting because of religion and whatnot. I believe that will cure a lot of different things, and we could talk about the things that matter to every family. And once we do that, I educate you, you educate me, we educate our kids, they grew up together, and they can have different religions and still prosper, because that's what we see the other cultures doing. They're prospering right off the backs of African Americans, no matter what it is.
I like that. I totally agree with you on that. And so going back to the school portions, for our kids. So how do you feel like whenever let's say when your kid they're in high school and they learn about slavery in America and race and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But when they get to college, there's something totally different about it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I think, again, I had a different experience, right? But I know exactly where you're coming from. And I think in Texas, they even tried to take the word slavery out of it, right? They tried to take the word slavery out of it, which is wrong. I think it has to be taught the proper way. I think it has to be taught for what it is. I think it has to be taught as harsh as it is. Going back to religion, right? If you're going to tell me how much pain Jesus suffered at the cross and how he took the nails and how he took it, all this beating and this whipping, you're telling me that to bring me in and connect me with the passion that he had for me, that the love he had for me, right? So you understand that if you water it down, what I went through, it must have been all right. It was just servitude. They were just butlering. They were doing all, they were all right. They were being cared for. They had days off, so which is farthest from the truth, right? So we can't dummy this thing down. We have to make sure that it's taught, the brutality is taught as brutality.
And why do you think so many high school teachers or anything from college why do you think they always try to be around the bush about that particular topic?
One, to keep their jobs, right? I think they want to keep their jobs and they don't want to be seen as some militant maybe. But I think that would be the main, and they don't want to be the burden bearers of bad news, that it wasn't like America wanted it to be, that it wasn't just this period of time where people were actually just living out back and just working because they don't, that's safe. It's, Let me stay in the safe zone. So I think that's mainly it. It's comfortable, it's safe, and I don't have to worry about upsetting my coworkers. I don't have to worry about upsetting these kids who will go home and tell their family, and maybe it'll hurt the attendance at the school. Maybe it'll hurt the admissions. So I think that we have to be ready to take that on, though, and really tell it like it is. But I think that that's also tied into where you get where we start sending our children as well. I was fortunate enough to have a, like I said, HBCU experience where I was taught the same thing that the kids at the PWIs were learning, but it was taught with how it would affect me. So you learn the psychology, you learn about whether it be Wilhelm van Woudt, and you're taught that he's the grandfather of psychology, and Sigmund Freud and all these guys, right? But when I hear, Wilhelm van Woudt, he's the grandfather of psychology. Well, guess what, Jane? You and I don't look like the grandfather. So therefore, we must not be accepted as his kids. I didn't think about that. But the process is still here. Everything, the tests are still here. Everything is wrong. But I have to now process the fact that the reason he was deemed this was to block you out. So therefore, if I'm not related to the grandfather, I shouldn't even wear the hat of doctor of psychology. I shouldn't wear, these grandioso titles if I'm not related to the originator. So we had to be careful in that and send our kids to places where we know that they'll be educated properly and honestly.
So let's say things switch around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, what if all that happened to us in our history, but it was vice versa? Like, where blacks were oppressing white people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it'll still be the same or a little bit different?
I think I would be, if we had did the oppression, I would definitely be in a different class, right? But I can't honestly say where I would be if I was having the same heart that I have. If God would still bestow me the same heart, I would have been right there with whoever Willona or whoever Tubman, whoever replaced Harriet on the Underground Railroad. From that side, I've probably been working with her to make sure that that people were free, because that's what I'm about. I don't believe in racism. So no matter how it's thrown, whether it's us being negative, and I don't believe. Now let me say this: I don't believe blacks can be racist. I believe we can respond to racism. So, but in this scenario, though, if we were the oppressor, I would definitely be on the helping side to make sure that this is removed, because I understand the nature of humanity, and this is not it. Racism is not humanity. It is a taught and learned thing. And as watching my 4-year-old go in his classroom, where he is the only African-American boy in the classroom, I watch him interact with all of his classmates, and he loves them. And he doesn't see them any different than he sees his mother and I. He just knows that those are his friends, and he loves them. And he comes home, and when he says his prayers and we ask him who is he thankful for, he goes through his parents, he goes through his grandparents, and he calls out all of his classmates by name. That's what I would have. I know I would be in that line to help those whites who will be oppressed out of oppression.
And so with that same ideal of being vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
do you think for other besides you, for any other black people, how do you think that they would react to that, if they were the oppressors?
I think I have a lot of friends that I remember. We talked about the social media thing, and I believe you surround yourself with like-minded people. I can see those persons being with me in that movement of freeing those and making sure that those go free, and that laws are put in place that breaks that system. But I also probably have some friends that I probably could see who are so bitter right now and are so angry that they would probably benefit from the system, as many others has. Would I see them cracking the whip? No, but I could see them strengthening the system like I see a lot of my other friends doing now by simply exercising their privilege. I think white privilege is definitely there, and I could see people utilizing black privilege.
And so with the idea of black privilege, you think that like the same for all the things that happened so far in our history, you think it would probably say what happened with if that was just switched around?
Black privilege? That's a new thing, man. You know what?
Yeah, I didn't realize.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying we just created that, right? So black privilege. I mean, what would it? Now, what's the question again? So
do you think like it will still be the same as like it was white privilege?
Yeah, I think so. I think so because I think if the nature of a man, nature of humans, is to just to move within their culture, right? So I think a lot of whites who do not believe in racism strengthen it through white privilege. So do I see us doing the same thing, moving just to move with the culture? Yeah, I would see us moving. Not all of us. Those who are sitting there say, you know what, it's not a bad thing. So I'm gonna go. I don't believe in that, but I'm gonna take the benefits of it. Oh, they got loans for X amount of dollars. And we're going to create a red line where this community over here is now, just ran over with poverty. Yeah, I can see us moving into the good community. Yeah. Actually, you probably can look in 2019, you probably can see the exercising of black privilege within racism even now. So I think if you look at a lot of people and where they are, I think they are already exercising black privilege in a racist culture.
So what if what if racism never did happen at all? How do you think the world will be at this point?
Man, I think we'll be I think technology will be in a different space because I think that a lot of times a lot of those who are creative are being held back or not being acknowledged. I think we'd be leaps and bounds beyond where we are in this world. One of the things I often use in describing it is for those who are familiar, or if you're familiar, The Blind Side.
Yes.
The Blind Side was, obviously a story of Michael Orr where he was basically this big 6'7", 6'8" athlete, but he was able to be discovered only because of his size and his just how his body just looked. And he said, surely that guy can play football, right? But if we had an education system that was really tied in to making sure that all Americans were taken care of, man, the blind side would actually be more so going into communities, seeing little black girls and little black boys to say, that's my nurse, that's my doctor, that's my lawyer. We don't do that. We don't recognize each other like that, right? So if we didn't have that racist concept, we wouldn't be seeking out bucks, so to speak, to play sports. I'm just being honest, we'd be seeking out that which is more important. We put athletes so high on the pedestal sometimes, but what we forget about is the true movers of our society are the thinkers. All right, the thinkers and those who can think and those who can aspire in the STEM, right? STEM would be blown out of the world. Man, we throw STEM around to kids now, and we see these young kids, man, they're booming right now. What if we gave that opportunity to every kid? Every kid, create your robotics, they could do it. They have the minds for it. Yeah, give it to every kid. You would lessen crime because people would just be enjoying life. If you really talked about humanity as a whole, you wouldn't have anybody trying to rush a border because they'd be fine where they are. If there was an injustice, we'd all go to put out the flame, right? So that's how I see it. If there was never a racism, where would we be? We'd be leaps and bounds beyond technology. our caring for each other, I believe that we live longer. I believe we live longer because not because doctors would be better, it's because I believe we'll understand that what we put in our body, because we care more for ourselves, we care to be here for our families longer. So I believe that.
I love that. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And so going back to our earlier conversation about white people trying to be black and all that, and
Mm-hmm.
or vice versa. So how do you feel, excuse my French, about white people or saying niggers and all that, saying nigga or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I'm kind of, it's always a tough topic, right? But again, you're talking to me. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with them saying the word, but at the same time, I debate us saying the word a lot of times, whether it be, as they say, with the hard R or the A. I don't want you to say either one. I actually had an incident where I was at work, and so my team, I hadn't been with them a long time. A couple weeks had passed, so my teaching team, they said, "Sir, you hadn't came to lunch with us in a while." So I said, "You know what? I'm gonna go to lunch with y'all today. Y'all just tell me the time." And I jump in the car with them, and as we jump in the car, and I think it's Yo Gotti or somebody, but it's my, and they're just in the car singing like it's nothing wrong with it. So I said, "No, whoa, time out." Now being that it's only one African American, the other four are other, and I was like, "What are we doing? What are we doing?" So I totally ruined lunch. Because I was disappointed in an African American who would sit there and let them say that, but I don't know his full background. But at the same time, I'm sitting there like, what are y'all doing where y'all think y'all so comfortable around me that y'all can say that?
And why do you think, like, for some people, they think it's okay to say that around, like, someone they have a black friend or just in general?
I think it could be where they're raised a lot of times, what they've experienced growing up. I think background plays a lot. I think it could be apathy. Just want to overlook everything and just hit, nothing matters. So I think that could be part of the problem, but we can't get that. We can't get there. We can't get there. Do I believe we are? No, I don't believe we are the N-words. Do I believe we will ever be? No, we can't be that. But what you will not do is you won't say it in my presence. And for those who think that it's okay, I always question, so when they leave your presence and they're in the other company of other people, what do you think they say about you? They use that word toward you. I understand the whole empowerment of it, where we've taken the word and we've given it power and friendship and love, but there are so many other words that we can use.
Yeah.
So many other words we can use: brother, sister, kin. So many words we can use. I understand the power that a lot of the cultures have given it, but I can't let it go to the other side.
And like I know from my experiences, like some people say it's just a word, and how does that make you feel, like saying that the N word is just a word?
Desensitization. We've been desensitized to everything. Unfortunately, we desensitize ourselves. It's not just a word. It was a word that was demeaning to our ancestors. It was a word that took away so much life. It was a word that was very provoking, that was intended to provoke, to remove you from where you were. So it's not just a word. It's a very powerful word. It's a very hurtful word. And we're not removed, like I said, I was born in 74, but we have people who marched and people who were basically shot, killed, who had family members shot and killed, stabbed, people who were taken out of their house and called this word to have family members never come back, who are still among us. And it's disrespectful to them. And I think that's where it is. So to say that it's just a word is to really play it down and to do ourselves an injustice.
And so I'm gonna so now we're gonna go into more spiritual side of it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your background in faith, like your religion per se.
I grew up Christian. Grew up in the church. In Louisiana, a little small church. Always had activities going on at the church. I definitely came up as one of those kids, as they say, was when it came to church, I was drugged. I was drugged to Bible study, drugged to choir rehearsal, drugged to everything else. But I found my own peace in church. I found my relationship with God to be a personal relationship, and it was very strong, and it has been strong since.
And how would you relate your faith to the experiences you have faced throughout your life?
If it had not been for my faith, I don't think I would have had anything to truly lean on. You can lean on people. You can lean on, if you want to say your education and everything else, but it all came back to my faith. It was what I believed to be right, what I believed to be wrong, what I read, what I felt in my spirit, what I felt like God was telling me. So my faith is it was my leaning post. It always has been.
And with that added, so like, especially for your own faith, how do you think they just in general, like, how do you think they have dealt with like race issues?
How does faith deal with race issues?
Yeah, within church leaders, how do you think they deal with it?
I think what I've experienced is I've seen some great faith leaders step into the place of advocates for their community, and they've done an excellent job. They've voiced the concerns of the people. They have stood when no one else would stand. And I saw those leaders, and one of the things that it did, it inspired me to want to be like them and to carry on in my faith. At some point, I knew that there was always the faith leader that I could come back to, that pastor, that minister, that mother in the church, those who were strong in the faith, who would sow into your word when things look bleak.
And so do you think that religion or your own faith may have caused the problems of race also?
I don't think it caused the problem of race. I can see the seededness of racism in that, it's hard to love, coming from a black perspective, it's hard to love any faith or religious background where you feel like this is the religion that's actually enslaving you or practiced by the one that's enslaving you. But historically, when you look back, Christianity has been for years, when we talk about Africa and going back, that it was being practiced years ago. So do I feel like it could be an hindrance to unity? Yes, I believe it can. Do I believe it helped in some forms of racism? Yeah, because I don't want to believe in anything necessarily that somebody is beating me and saying, this is my faith. Because obviously I don't want nothing you have. I want my freedom. So I can understand how that ties in. But my faith tells me that these people who are actually doing it in the name of faith weren't doing it ever in the name of faith. They were just going to be doing it regardless. They just utilized Christianity as an escape tool to when the person would rise up and everything else, unfortunately. But they're also utilizing that on people who could not read for themselves.
And so, how do you think most religions address the issue of racism?
I don't think a lot of religions just address, in my opinion, I don't believe that they address it head on, because I think there's still the ability to try to please your congregations. You know, could it be a little bit stronger? I know some religions out there that are doing it. I mean, faith communities that are doing it, but the majority, I don't believe that they're doing it.
They're probably very narrow-minded about it.
I think that they're very not narrow-minded, but I believe that they say as long as everything is moving and we're not going back to slavery, we're okay. Everybody got the right to vote. Everybody's good. All right, so let's keep on preaching. Let's keep on going the way we're doing it. I'm talking about every faith. You know, let's do this thing. Hey, let's come together on Martin Luther King Day. Let's come together on Easter. Let's come together on Christmas. Let's do things together. But I think we're still dealing in the day of what we say that Sunday is still the most segregated day of the week when it comes to America.
And so this means that I'll ask you questions.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about the younger generations coming in and compared to your generation on the issue of racism?
You know what? I believe that the younger generation has it a little bit more challenging coming after me, only because I believe that my generation has to do more for them. And I believe that my generation is very comfortable, unfortunately. I believe that my generation is a generation of we receive certain disciplinary tactics that we've gone away from, certain family aspects we've gone away from. And in doing that, when we went away, I believe we failed the generation to follow. So I believe that we failed them in that aspect. So I believe their generation before us was teaching us. They were very much in teaching us. I think we've actually treated the generation below us in saying, they don't want to listen. They'll get it. They'll learn eventually. That's not education. We should be teaching our younger generation. So we've kind of left them out to fend for themselves. So, but thankfully, for those who will control their own narrative, I think that we see a lot of information coming now forward that we didn't have as a generation that is being shared to them via internet. They can now look up things at the touch of a dime, but I still think that there's a learning, but then there's also application. And being that I've been through it, I should be able to assist those apply what they've learned.
And for your son, do you have any fears that, like, for when he grows up, that he might either be ignorant to racial issues, or the fact that it might actually affect him?
I don't have any fear about him. As for me in my house, we're going to be teaching history. I remind him on a daily that I love his hair, I love his skin, I love everything about him. And I'm saying, I physically tell him, we have our mantra that we practice, where it's basically saying, I'm special, I'm blessed, I have purpose, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So that's our daily mantra as he leaves the door when he's not half asleep. You know, so But no, these are things that I sow into him because going back to the high school and going back to that 365 days of Black history, I know how it affected high school students. So how much more will that mean to give it early into a 4-year-old? And if I can implant that into him of who he is and where he's come from and all the great works of people that have come that look just like him, man, how much greater will he be? And then we have great family members who have done excellent work, who have planted excellent seeds, whether it be from an HBCU, whether it be in great businesses, whether it be through the Air Force Academy and flying and aviation. We've done that. So I've never been one not to want to tell him his history. So he will know his history, but he will know the application of history as well. Not just say, oh, this is what they did, but also to say, this is what they had to go through. Because I can tell you that that your grandfather or father was this, and this is what you can be. But this is maybe what you have to go through to get it. You may have to fight through a discriminatory process of racial profiling. You may have to go through a classroom where you are the only one in there, but you can make it through. You just focus on the lesson. Learn this early. And I think that'll make a difference. Learn that early, that your kid it's not enough to just tell them they can be anything, but you have to tell them that they may have to go through something to get there.
And do you believe that for the years to come that the racism will be will just die out with each young generation getting to know each other a little bit more, or do you believe that it'll probably stick around still?
I think it'll stick around. I think it'll stick around because I see a younger generation that is embracing what we're seeing in our nation right now, and it's being pushed hard. It's being pushed hard, but we have to push harder. We have to push back harder. And my thought process is maybe even those who are being taught will wake up one day and understand that somebody did them wrong, that they did them an injustice, and they missed out on friendships. They missed out on getting to know people. They missed out on getting to know certain cultures. That's my prayer, that they'll wake up, even the ones that are being taught, because we're so much better together.
And to end this off, is there anything you'd like to say to those that are listening now?
Racism has existed as long as I can remember, but I believe that it can be non-effective if we just keep aware, if we make sure that we do our background checks on people, if we do the work, if we don't just do it on emotion, but we see how people have, where they've given to, where they give of themselves, we can not erase racism in a sense of it still belonging to the person, but I'm prayerful that we can remove it from the effectiveness of the system. And that's where it really operates at. So my prayer is that we just make sure that we exercise the civil rights that have been given to us, that we continue to tell the stories, that we be not ignorant ourselves of when we see it, that we research our history, that we know what it looks like when it's rising again, right? So when we do those things and we come together and we educate ourselves, we show the love that we want to be shown back to us, we'll be a whole lot better country.